The golf ball soared, a white speck against the endless Arizona sky, and I, Elliot Harper, stood frozen, my heart pounding not from the swing but from the man watching me. His name was Julian Torres, my golf instructor, and his gaze felt like a physical touch, unraveling me in ways I hadn't anticipated when I booked this lesson. At 28, I thought I knew myself, until he stepped closer, his voice low, and said, "Elliot, you're holding back." What does it mean to hold back? When you've spent your life curating a version of yourself for others. Family, colleagues, the small town of Flagstaff where everyone knows your name. How do you even begin to let go? I'd moved to Phoenix 3 months ago, chasing a fresh start after a breakup that left me hollow, but I hadn't expected this. A golf lesson turning into a mirror reflecting parts of me I'd buried deep. Julian was 32, with a presence that filled the fairway. His dark eyes held stories, his broad shoulders carried confidence, and his accent, a faint trace of his Mexican heritage, made every instruction sound like poetry. "Grip the club like you mean it," he said, stepping behind me, his hands guiding mine. His touch was firm yet gentle, and I swear the desert heat doubled. I wasn't here for this. I'd booked the lesson to impress a client, to blend into the corporate world of schmoozing and scorecards. But Julian's proximity was rewriting my intentions. The golf course, nestled in the shadow of Camelback Mountain, was a sprawl of green against the arid landscape. It was late afternoon, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows that made the world feel intimate, conspiratorial. "Focus on your stance," Julian murmured, his breath brushing my ear. I fumbled, my swing sending the ball into a sand trap. He laughed. Not mocking, but warm, like he saw through my awkwardness to something real. Why does a stranger's laugh feel like home? Have you ever met someone who, in a single moment, makes you question everything you've accepted about yourself? I wasn't ready for the answer, but Julian's presence was a question I couldn't ignore. He suggested we take the cart to the next hole. I climbed in, my palms sweaty, not from the swing but from the way he looked at me, like he saw the parts I'd hidden even from myself. "You're not like the others I teach," he said, driving slowly, the cart humming along the path. "Most people come here to show off. You're searching for something." Was I? I thought I'd come to Phoenix to escape. A bad relationship. A family that never understood why I couldn't just settle down. My ex, Mark, had called me cold, said I didn't know how to love. Maybe he was right. But as Julian spoke, his words cracked open a door I'd locked long ago. "What do you think I'm searching for?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He stopped the cart near a quiet fairway, the world silent except for the distant chirp of a cactus wren. "You tell me," he said, turning to face me. His eyes held no judgment, only curiosity, and it was that openness that undid me. I wanted to say I was searching for a promotion, for stability, for the version of success my parents could brag about at church. But the truth slipped out instead. I don't know who I am anymore. Julian didn't flinch. He leaned closer, his hand resting on the cart's frame, inches from mine. "Maybe you're not supposed to know yet," he said. "Maybe you're just supposed to feel it." His words hung between us, heavy with possibility. I wanted to laugh it off, to retreat to the safety of small talk, but something in his gaze held me there, raw and exposed. What does it mean to feel without fear? To let someone see you, not the mask you wear, but the messy, uncertain truth beneath? I didn't know, but as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in hues of fire, I felt the first stirrings of an answer. We continued the lesson, but it was no longer about golf. Each swing, each correction was a conversation without words. His hand brushed mine as he adjusted my grip, and I didn't pull away. The air between us crackled, electric, and I wondered if he felt it too. "You're getting it," he said, but his smile suggested he meant more than my swing. By the time we reached the final hole, the sky was a canvas of pinks and oranges, the desert alive with the hum of evening. Julian parked the cart near a cluster of saguaro cacti, their silhouettes stark against the sunset. "One last swing," he said, but neither of us moved. The world felt suspended, like we were the only two people in it. "Elliot," he said, his voice softer now, "why did you really book this lesson?" The question wasn't accusatory. It was an invitation. I could have lied, could have said it was just for work, but the truth was clawing its way out. "I wanted to feel something," I admitted. "Something real." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from him. "And did you?" he asked. My breath caught, my heart a wild thing in my chest. I didn't answer with words. I didn't need to. The space between us vanished, and for the first time in years, I wasn't holding back. The moment stretched, fragile and electric, as Julian's hand found mine. His touch was a spark, igniting something I'd spent years trying to smother. Here, on a golf course in the heart of Phoenix, with the desert whispering secrets, I was no longer just Elliot Harper, the guy who followed the rules. What did it mean to break them? Have you ever stood on the edge of something and felt the pull of the unknown? That's where I was, teetering, with Julian's eyes searching mine for permission to leap. His fingers tightened around mine, and I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned in, my lips meeting his in a kiss that felt like falling and flying all at once. The golf cart was our anchor, its cool metal pressing against my back as he bent me over it. Not with force, but with a tenderness that stole my breath. "Elliot," he whispered against my lips, "is this okay?" His voice was a lifeline, grounding me in the chaos of my own heart. I nodded, unable to speak, my hands gripping his shoulders as if letting go would mean losing myself entirely. The world narrowed to the heat of his body, the softness of his mouth, the way his hands traced the lines of my fear and desire. But even in that moment, doubt crept in. What was I doing? I was a data analyst, a guy who planned every step, who moved to Phoenix to rebuild, not to unravel. Julian was a stranger, a golf instructor with a smile that could undo a lifetime of caution. Yet here I was, kissing him under a desert sky, my carefully constructed life crumbling like sand. We pulled apart, breathless, and he rested his forehead against mine. "I didn't plan this," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I've wanted to do that since you stepped onto the fairway." His honesty disarmed me. I wanted to ask why me, why now, but the question felt too big, too raw. Instead, I asked, "What happens next?" It was a question for both of us, for the space between who I was and who I might become. Julian smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his lips. "We play the next hole," he said, but his eyes said something else. "We see where this takes us." The drive back to the clubhouse was quiet, the hum of the cart filling the silence. I stole glances at him, his profile sharp against the fading light. He was beautiful, not just in the way his dark hair curled at the nape of his neck, but in the way he carried himself, open, unafraid, like he'd already faced his demons and come out stronger. "Do you do this with all your students?" I asked, half joking, half desperate for reassurance. He laughed, the sound warm and unforced. "No, Elliot, you're different." The word landed like a stone in still water, rippling through me. Different. I'd spent my life trying to be anything but. Back at the clubhouse, the world intruded. Other golfers milled about, their laughter loud and carefree. I felt exposed, like they could see the kiss written on my skin. Julian seemed unbothered, chatting easily with a colleague before turning back to me. "Same time next week?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes intense. What does it mean to say yes to something that scares you? To choose a path that might lead to joy or heartbreak? I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, next week. That night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. The memory of Julian's kiss burned through me, but so did the weight of my past. Growing up in Flagstaff, I'd learned to hide parts of myself. My parents were kind but traditional, their love conditional on my fitting into their vision of a good son. I dated Mark to prove I could be normal, but it hadn't been enough. He'd left, saying I was too closed off, too afraid to feel. Was he right? I stared at the ceiling, the desert night pressing against my windows. Julian had seen something in me I wasn't sure existed. A spark, a possibility. But letting him in meant risking everything. My carefully built life, my family's approval, my own fragile sense of self. The next morning, I went to work, my mind only half on the spreadsheets and client calls. My colleague, Priya, noticed. "You okay, Elliot?" she asked, her brown eyes sharp with concern. She was 30, a transplant from Chicago, and one of the few people I'd let get close since moving here. "You look distracted. How do you explain a moment that changes everything?" I shrugged, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about golf." She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. I wondered what she'd say if I told her the truth. Not about the golf, but about the man who'd turned a lesson into something more. By the time my next lesson rolled around, I was a mess of nerves and anticipation. Julian was waiting at the course, his smile as warm as the Arizona sun. "Ready to improve that swing?" he asked, but the way he looked at me said this was about more than golf. I nodded, my heart racing, and followed him onto the fairway, wondering what it meant to step into the unknown. The golf club felt foreign in my hands, a prop in a scene I no longer understood. Julian stood beside me, his presence a steady pulse against my uncertainty, but the question lingered. What was I swinging for? Purpose? Connection? Or something I couldn't yet name? Each lesson with Julian was a dance, a push and pull between technique and truth. He corrected my form, his hands guiding my shoulders, but his touch lingered, sparking questions I wasn't ready to answer. "You're overthinking it," he said, his voice low as we stood on the third hole, the desert stretching endless around us. "Let your body lead." But how do you trust your body when your mind is a maze of doubt? That day, he suggested a break, leading me to a shaded bench overlooking the course. We sat, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. "Tell me about you," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Not the guy who booked this lesson. The real you. What does it mean to be real? To strip away the layers you've built to survive?" I hesitated, then spoke, my words halting at first. I told him about Flagstaff, about the weight of my parents' expectations, about Mark and the way his leaving had confirmed my worst fears. Julian listened, his eyes never leaving mine, and when I finished, he didn't offer platitudes. Instead, he said, "You're not broken, Elliot. You're just finding your way." His words were a balm, but they also stung. Finding my way meant admitting I was lost, and that was a truth I'd avoided for years. I looked at him, at the way his hands rested on his knees, strong and steady, and I wanted to believe him. "What about you?" I asked. "What's your story?" Julian's smile was tinged with something bittersweet. He told me about growing up in Tucson, the son of Mexican immigrants, navigating a world that didn't always welcome him. He'd come out at 20, lost friends, faced his family's silence, but found strength in owning his truth. "Golf was my escape," he said, gesturing to the fairway. "It taught me control, patience. But you're teaching me something else." My heart stuttered. "What's that?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He leaned closer, his shoulder brushing mine. "That some risks are worth taking." The air between us hummed, and I felt the pull again, that edge between safety and surrender. I wanted to kiss him, to lose myself in the moment, but fear held me back. What if this was a mistake? What if I wasn't ready? The rest of the lesson passed in a blur, my swings better but my mind elsewhere. As we drove back to the clubhouse, Julian's hand brushed mine on the cart seat. A quiet question. I didn't pull away, but I didn't answer either. The weight of his gaze was too much, too real. That night, I called Priya, needing someone to ground me. We met at a coffee shop in Tempe, its walls lined with local art, the air thick with the scent of espresso. "Okay, spill," she said, her eyes narrowing. "You've been weird all week. How do you explain a feeling you don't fully understand?" I told her about Julian. Not the kiss, not yet, but the way he made me question everything. "He sees me," I said, my voice cracking, "and I'm not sure I'm ready for that." Priya sipped her latte, thoughtful. "Maybe it's not about being ready," she said. "Maybe it's about being brave." Her words echoed Julian's, and I wondered if the universe was trying to tell me something. But bravery felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Not when my family's voices still rang in my head, warning me to stay safe, to stay small. The next lesson was different. Julian was quieter, his usual warmth tempered by something I couldn't place. "Did I push too far?" he asked as we walked to the fifth hole, the sun high and unforgiving. His vulnerability caught me off guard. I wanted to say no, to tell him it was me, my fear, my walls. Instead, I said, "I don't know what I'm doing." He stopped, turning to face me. "You don't have to know," he said. "You just have to show up." His hand found mine, brief but grounding, and I felt the world shift. Showing up, was that enough? Could it be? By the end of the lesson, I was exhausted, not from the swings but from the weight of possibility. Julian drove us back, the cart's hum a steady rhythm. "Dinner," he said suddenly, not a question but an offer. "Tomorrow night, just us." What does it mean to say yes to a moment that could change everything? My heart said yes before my mind could catch up. "Okay," I said, and his smile was brighter than the desert sun. The restaurant was a small, candlelit place in Scottsdale, its walls adorned with murals of the desert. Julian sat across from me, his dark eyes catching the flicker of the flame, and I wondered, how does a single evening become a turning point? When does a moment become a memory you carry forever? Dinner was his idea, a step beyond the golf course, and I'd spent the day second-guessing my decision to come. I was 28, still piecing myself together after years of trying to be what others wanted. Julian, at 32, seemed so sure of himself, his laughter easy as he told stories of his childhood in Tucson, of learning to golf on dusty municipal courses. But there was a shadow in his eyes, a hint of battles fought and won, and it made me want to know more. "Why me?" I asked, the question slipping out over plates of grilled cactus and tamales. He paused, his fork hovering, then set it down. "Because you're honest," he said. "Even when you're scared, you don't hide it. That's rare, Elliot." Was it? I felt like a fraud, my life a series of masks to keep the world at bay. But Julian's words made me want to believe him, to see myself through his eyes. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing from favorite books to fears we'd never shared. He told me about his first love, a boy in high school who broke his heart, and I told him about Mark, about the way I tried to love someone who didn't see me. What does it mean to be seen? To have someone look at you and not flinch from the truth? As the night wore on, I felt lighter, like I was shedding layers I hadn't known I carried. When Julian reached for my hand across the table, I didn't pull away. His touch was an anchor, a promise that this, whatever this was real. We left the restaurant and walked through Old Town Scottsdale, the streets alive with music and lights. He stopped near a fountain, its water catching the glow of nearby lanterns, and pulled me close. "Elliot," he said, his voice low, "I don't know where this is going, but but I want to find out. Do you? The question was a crossroads. I could say no, retreat to the safety of my solitary life, or I could leap, trusting that Julian would catch me. Yes, I said, and his kiss was softer this time, deeper like a vow. We stood there, the world fading, and I felt something shift inside me. A spark of courage, a glimpse of who I could be. But the next day, reality crashed in. My phone rang, my mother's name flashing on the screen. Her voice was warm but probing, asking about my job, my life, and then, inevitably, "Have you met anyone special?" The question was innocent, but it carried the weight of her expectations. A nice girl, a stable future, a life that fit her worldview. I mumbled something vague, my stomach twisting. How could I tell her about Julian? Would she even try to understand? I met Priya for lunch, needing her clarity. "My family won't get it," I told her, picking at my sandwich. "They think being gay is a choice, a sin." Priya's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "You can't live for them, Elliot. What do you want?" What did I want? I wanted Julian's laugh, his touch, the way he made me feel alive. But I also wanted my family's love, their approval. The two felt incompatible, a choice between my heart and my roots. Priya reached for my hand. "You don't have to decide today," she said. "But don't let fear decide for you." That evening, Julian texted, asking me to meet him at the course. It wasn't a lesson, just us, sitting on the hood of his car, watching the stars emerge over the desert. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his shoulder brushing mine. I told him about my mother's call, about the fear that kept me tethered to a version of myself I didn't want to be. He listened, his hand finding mine. "I came out to my family 10 years ago," he said. "It wasn't easy. My dad didn't speak to me for a year, but I couldn't keep hiding. You deserve to live your truth, Elliot, whatever that is." His words were a challenge, a call to be brave. But bravery felt like a tightrope, and I wasn't sure I could walk it. As we sat there, the desert night cool against my skin, I wondered, could I choose myself without losing everything else? The desert sky was a tapestry of stars, each one a question I couldn't answer. Julian's hand was warm in mine, his presence a steady anchor, but the weight of my choices pressed against me. What does it mean to choose love when it might cost you everything? The weeks that followed were a blur of moments. Stolen kisses on the golf course, late-night talks in Julian's apartment, his laughter filling the spaces I'd left empty. But with every step closer to him, the shadow of my family grew larger. I hadn't told them about Julian, hadn't found the words to bridge the gap between who I was and who they wanted me to be. One evening, Julian took me to a community center in Phoenix, a place where queer youth gathered to find support. He volunteered there, he said, to give back what he'd needed at their age. Watching him with the kids, listening, joking, offering a quiet strength, I saw a man who'd built a life on his own terms. "You could have this too," he said later as we drove back. "A life that's yours." But what was mine? I'd spent so long trying to please others, my parents, Mark, even myself, that I wasn't sure where I began. The thought of coming out to my family felt like stepping into a storm, but hiding Julian felt like betraying him and myself. The breaking point came when my parents visited. They arrived in Phoenix, their smiles warm but their questions pointed. Over dinner, my mother asked again about my dating life, her tone hopeful. I froze, Julian's face flashing in my mind. "I'm seeing someone," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Her smile faltered. "Who is she?" she asked, and my father leaned forward, expectant. The restaurant felt too small, the air too thick. "It's not a she," I said, my voice shaking. "His name is Julian." Silence. My mother's face went pale, my father's jaw tightened. "Elliot," he said, his voice low, "this isn't you." The words cut deeper than I'd expected. confirming every fear I'd carried. They left the next day, their goodbye stiff, and I felt the weight of their disappointment like a physical thing. I went to Julian, needing his strength. He held me as I cried, his arms a safe harbor. "You did something brave," he said. "It doesn't feel like it now, but you did." But bravery didn't erase the pain of my parents' rejection, the fear that I'd lost them for good. Priya was there too, her support unwavering. "Give them time," she said. "They might surprise you." I wanted to believe her, but the ache in my chest said otherwise. Still, Julian's love was a light in the darkness, a reminder that I wasn't alone. Months later, I stood on the golf course again, not as a student but as Julian's partner. We'd built something real, something worth fighting for. My swing was better, but more importantly, so was I. I'd started writing to my parents, small notes about my life, about Julian, hoping to rebuild what we'd lost. They hadn't responded yet, but I held on to hope, the way Julian held on to me. As the sun set, painting the desert in hues of gold, Julian pulled me close, his lips brushing mine. "You're enough," he whispered, and for the first time, I believed him. The golf cart sat nearby, a silent witness to the moment that had changed everything. What does it mean to live your truth? It's not a single choice, but 1,000 small ones. Each swing, each step, each moment of courage. I'd booked a golf lesson, but what I found was so much more. A love that bent me over the cart and took my breath away. A life that was finally mine.